Hello, everyone. Welcome to your weekly live coaching session with Sean and myself. I hope you're all
Hello.
doing well. Excuse me, bit of a hiccup there, came straight through. So we'll get straight into it. Today's call, we're going to be talking about challenging thoughts. So this is an exercise which is something we've been using relatively recently, I'd say, with regards to it's very psychology based. And it's a big one for addressing our thoughts and feelings around food and how our behaviors kind of stem into them, really. And it can be an absolute game changer, in my opinion, because the identity and the messages you tell yourself become self-fulfilling prophecies in many ways. And all of us will have different mindsets when it comes to food, when it comes to business, when it comes to our ability at sport. You know, we have these messages we tell ourselves, which then often become the reality, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, no, they sometimes those negative thoughts lead you to not even bother trying anything. You know, it's like if you say I'm terrible at tennis because you played once and you weren't good. Like you're never gonna play tennis again because you're just gonna go, oh, I'm no good at it. I've got no hand-eye coordination. That's what I used to say all the time. I did the same thing with football. I'd be like, oh, I've got no hand-eye coordination, so no foot-eye coordination. But the more I play regularly, the better I get at it, right? Which is the same with anything, really.
Yeah.
Then you start saying, oh, actually, I'm actually not too bad. Like,
And then you're more inclined to practice and
yeah,
do it more often.
and do it more often. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. There's that whole myth of like talent over ability and well over hard work. And there's a couple of great books by Matthew Syed about it. Like one was called Bounce, which was around the power of practice and the myth of talent. And then another was called Black Box Thinking, which was kind of his follow-up on that, on right, embracing failure and accountability to make you better.
Yeah.
And in Bounce, he talks about how it's really interesting the words you use with children. I think Carol Dweck talks about in Mindset as well, with regards to like if you were to say to a kid like, "Oh, you know, you're so good at this, you must be so naturally talented," they would be more likely to not try in fear of failure.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want their talent to be exposed as not being a talent, and then they can say, well, you know, it's fine, like I didn't succeed because I didn't try, and then they have that get out clause. Whereas if you were to say, oh wow, you know, you're so good at this, you must have worked so hard, you're then praising the hard work, which inspires that hard work.
Yeah.
And it's this language then that can then affect us when it comes to food, because you know, people watching this might be thinking, well, how's that got anything to do with food? But the language you tell yourself and that you've been told throughout your life with food will affect your relationship with it now. So the whole like clean your plate because people are starving, or giving you a McDonald's because you've been a good little boy or girl, or buying you ice cream because your childhood sweetheart's broken up with you, or you know, and these things become your then reality of your habits. But then it's also your thoughts around food, like, oh, you know, I don't have any self-control over X food, or, well, whenever I'm around this food, I always overeat, or, you know, whenever I get stressed, I overeat. That's just what I do. It's just who I am. They then become self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yeah, it becomes your identity, especially around those foods. And it's silly to say that, you know, oh, when I'm stressed, I eat. Because you don't eat a bowl of vegetables. You eat it. So, do you know what I mean?
If only.
Yeah. Life would be great if every time you were stressed, you ate a bowl of vegetables.
It's like, oh man, like I could really use a cucumber right now.
Yeah.
That would sort me
It's
out.
actually, it's more about what you told yourself in terms of, or like what you comforted with yourself with in the past, right? Like, and then that just becomes the thing that you do now. But you can change that.
Yeah,
You can change that narrative.
that's it. Yeah, and it's accepting that narrative can change. That's the first step. So for those of you watching this back, you're going to be able to change your thoughts around food. They're not fixed. And your ability to take certain action isn't fixed either. So if you always have an inclination to overeat chocolate, for example, that doesn't mean you don't need to have it in the house. Doesn't mean that you should remove it from the house. Like that, I remember there was an age-old idea of removing trigger foods and preparing your environment. And I think in the short term, that's fine because while you're working on things. But what you want to do is basically slowly reintroduce them and improve your relationship with that food.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be in a position where whenever you're around chocolate, you just go crazy, and so you never have it in because it'll never get better. It's like with phobias, what they do is they slowly reintroduce someone to that phobia. If someone's afraid of spiders, then it'll probably start with just imagining them being near a spider and being okay with that, and then bringing a spider into the room, but far away and in a cage, and then slowly getting closer and closer to them. And I think you can do a similar thing with food, kind of gradually increase that exposure as you get more confident with your ability to handle them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's things like, things that you, like biscuits, for example, it's very easy to obviously eat the whole packet. And I think, like, I used to do that because I'd want to get them out of the house. I really wanted them, but I'd have to also get them out of the house, so I'd be like, I'll just eat them all then.
It's that I'm starting healthy eating tomorrow, so I best eat everything like shit in the house.
Yeah, but actually, if you just have biscuits in the tin, and you can just have like 1 or 2 a day, like, then it's fine. Do you know what I mean? It's like you've given yourself that thing of, if I have biscuits, I'm going to eat the whole thing. But you just, every time you bought biscuits, if you can just say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to eat all of them right now. I'm going to have one, really enjoy it, embrace like this happiness that I get from eating a biscuit, and then I'm going to put the packet in the biscuit tin, and it's cool. It's like you always have this like fear of them, isn't it? Like, there's in a biscuit tin. Like, what do I like? Every time I go to the kitchen, I'm gonna reach for one.
What do I do? What do I
get that
do?
kind of like irrational fear though, of like, oh, I'm gonna stuff my face.
Yeah, and if you then fear that way, it will probably be the case.
Yeah.
Because you'll talk yourself into that behavior because that's what you've always done and that's what you've always known.
Yeah, and I think you have to try. Like, you have to experiment almost with like, okay, let's buy them, and then being okay with failing at it, like, but still persevering and thinking, right, no, look, the next time when I do that, I'm going to try my best to, not eat all of the biscuits. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to fill out this behavior awareness sheet. I'm going to challenge my thoughts. Or, do you know what I mean? You have to be willing to do the work, I think, as well. Quite a big thing of like, I was on a call with a client this morning who was just adamant that they wanted to track rather than do the hard work of going through the behavior awareness. And it's fine. Like, sometimes you're just not in a position where you feel like you've got the bandwidth to do it. But I think when it comes to something like this, it's like, it's important that you at least try, but understand that you might not succeed the first time. That doesn't mean you just stop.
Yeah.
And just resign yourself to not ever being able to control yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, in the past when I tracked, that was the only way that I had control over foods like biscuits and chocolate, is because I was like, right, okay, well, I'll fit them into my calories. And then over time, you start eating less nutrient dense food to fit more of this stuff into your calories. It's like, okay, like I can have 2 slices of cheesecake because that's 800 calories. And so I'll just make sure I don't have, I have that free.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I'll just make sure I don't eat real food.
Well, not really the thing you want to be going, or like I'll exercise more. Like, okay, like I'll make sure I walk more steps today and like go on an extra run because then I can have like 3 slices of cheesecake. Like, nah, that's not the attitude you want to be having. Like, having a good understanding of energy and energy out is fine. Knowing that when you do have higher activity days, you're going to be hungrier or need more energy. And again, that's fine. Like, there's a difference between knowing those things and planning for them for an overeating episode. So there's a difference between knowing, okay, I've been more active today, therefore I can have more food, or, I will probably be more hungry. It's different to saying, I'm going to go on an extra run just so that I can have 2 slices of cheesecake tonight.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
That's not okay. I think, like, in the short term, it can work. Like, the whole kind of like, saving calories for things that you want. But you've got to be doing work alongside that.
Mm-hmm.
As in, like, you've got to be then willing to say, right, but why did I have like 3 slices of cheesecake when one probably would have been enough, even though it fit in my calories?
Yeah.
Fine, it's fine for now, but I need to work on that. That's something I need to work on. So what can I do to work on that? After, I think that work needs to be done as well as, because when you figure out that you can fit stuff in your calories, for the first like few weeks, it's like, oh wow, Do you know
It's
what
like
I
a
mean?
hack.
You're like,
It's like a
"Ooh."
hack to life.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Like,
it's like, yeah, it's a proper
ooh,
life hack.
I can
It's like,
lose weight and still have
yeah,
biscuits. Like, what is
yeah,
this
should be
madness? What is
eating
this?
that. It fits in my calories, so
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
You know,
Fuck off.
yeah.
Perfectly fine with me, mate.
Yeah, but at the same, you've then got to, and then it gets to a point where you're like you said, where you start eating less nutrient dense foods because you can fit this other stuff in your calories.
Yeah,
And that again, that's a thought that you need to challenge, right? Because it's a thought that you're having.
exactly. This is it.
Yeah,
Is that by challenging these thoughts, the first step is just asking why.
yeah,
You've got to be aware of the thoughts that you're having, and then the first step is asking why you think that way. Because it's not necessarily, you don't want to judge your thoughts initially. You want to just be curious about them and think, okay,
just
well,
be aware of it.
why do I do that? Like, why do I
Yeah.
have that reaction around that food, or why do I do that at that certain time, or why do I just have this inclination to need to track everything? Why, like, why is that?
Yeah.
And when you can, there are steps that you can follow through with this of like, okay, what thought am I having? Where does this come from? Why am I thinking this way? And then you think about the evidence around that thought. Like, okay, well, what evidence is there to support that this is true? What evidence is against this thought? Like, what else is out there? And then you flip the script and think, well, what would potentially be a better way of thinking of this situation based on what I want right now, what my goals are, and what situation I'm in. And it's that process, as you said, it's that process that you're going through that does take time.
Yeah, yeah. I think like the biscuits one for me was quite a big one because once I challenged it, I was like, well, why do I eat the whole like half the pack? And then I was like, because that's what I've always done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but then you can just go, well, what if I don't do that? Do you know what I mean?
I don't do that.
Why? Because it's always like that's what I've always done. But what if I don't do that? And then like it just completely just that one thought made me think, I don't need to do that. Like it's just because that's what I've always done. That's how I've always done it. It doesn't mean I need to keep on doing it that way.
Yeah, that's then what becomes key is what if there is a new way out there?
Yeah.
Because people worry about doing a certain thing, as you said, because that's what they've always done. And then they're worried about trying something new. But actually it's a case of, well, what if that something new was the best thing that could ever happen to you? Yeah. And like I posted earlier this week this idea of like the 4 crazy questions, which we've been using a lot with clients. And it's this idea of what's good about not changing. So what's good about your current situation? Because there will be good there about it, because that's why you're doing it. It's not, it's not all bad. But then it would be what would be bad about changing that. So then again, that's an argument for the status quo. Mm-hmm. And then you start thinking about the change. You say, what's good about changing my behavior to something new? And then what might be bad about not changing my behavior? So then you're thinking, okay, well, if I don't change this, what's the bad thing that could happen? Mm-hmm. And I've used this with a few clients recently over certain situations, because you don't do this just about life. You do it about, okay, well, when I buy chocolate, I just eat the whole pack, or biscuits. And so you think, right, okay, with that action specifically, ask those 4 questions. What's good about not changing this behavior? What would be bad about changing this behavior? But what would be good about changing this behavior? And what might be bad about not changing this behavior? Because when you can go through that on a piece of paper and write it all down and then review it in front of you, you can then you basically talk yourself into changing. Yeah. Because you argue for the point of change. And if you don't talk yourself into changing, then there's still just a bit too much ambivalence there.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's the ambivalence. At least then you know that you're naturally ready to change. Because that's quite powerful as well. Because then you can stop spinning your wheels. Like if you know that you're not actually ready to change, you need to get to a point where you are ready to change, and up to that point you can then just be a bit kinder to yourself and think, okay, well, this is where I am right now, and if I don't want to change that much, then this must be okay.
Yeah, and you could choose a different behavior.
Yeah,
because again, we focus in our coaching practice on pretty much doing one thing at a time until that's nailed down. Because all too often you've tried a million things to do at once, and what happens is that you just end up burning out and hating life whatsoever. So, and doing nothing, and potentially, piling all the way back on and more, because you just go through this ultimate sabotage mode. So this is just on one behavior and one action in itself. Like you could do the same argument with, okay, well, what might be good about eating more vegetables? What's bad about eating more vegetables? What might be good about not eating vegetables? And what might be bad about not eating vegetables? And it's you can do it with anything. And by working on that one thing at a time, you're then going to be able to decide whether that's the right change for you right now. Because as you said, if there's too much ambivalence there and you're not 100% confident on making that change, then choose something else, because you want to be sort of 9 or 10 out of 10 confident that you can follow through this.
Yeah. And I think a lot of time people aren't ready to actually change. Do you know what I mean? That certain behaviour. And so it makes it difficult to try and start. It's like the kind of like, I'm going to start again on Monday type thing. It's very, if you're always saying that, then clearly something isn't computing with your readiness to change those certain behaviours. And like for a lot of people as well, I think it seems to be one thing that they really struggle to change. You know what I mean? It might just be like they eat too much chocolate, or they, people always say to me, "Oh, it's just crisps. I'm just obsessed with eating crisps." So I just, I have a bag of crisps and I eat the whole bag. Nothing else. I don't even like chocolate. I don't even like sweets. It's just crisps. And it's like, okay.
Yeah,
so
we have a special pull. Yeah. A special pull to any food that's high in carbohydrate and fat together. And some people are more savoury, which would be your crisps and your sausage rolls and things like that. And then other people are more sweet. Chips. And that would be your chocolate and less so candy, like actual sweets. But like I've got like a big sweet tooth for actual sweets, even though they are purely just high in carbohydrate. But then that was what the issue with learning more about nutrition was for me, because I was like, I know that like carbohydrate actually doesn't readily get stored as fat that often. It mostly gets stored as glycogen or burnt off, unless you go like way over, like 600, 800, 1,000 grams of carbs a day plus excess calories. So I was like, I can totally get this pick and mix and be fine, because I know that I won't go that far over my calories. Anyway, fat boy things aside. And that is totally true, by the way, in that, it takes a lot of energy for your body to turn carbohydrates into fat stores. It's not what your body would actually prefer to do. So that is a thing, which is why refeeds are predominantly done with carbohydrate increases and not just food increases, which is a big mistake people make. They're like, oh, refeed pizza. And you're like, no, because you just had loads of fat. But we digress. People have this, like, they'll have, as you said, like a problem food. And then that's where challenging the thought process starts to begin, because you don't always have to have that food issue. I emailed my list and I did a post about restriction causing overeating and talked about my childhood of, my mates having this biscuit drawer, and I became known as the kid that like always ransacked the biscuit drawer whenever I was around, because these foods weren't allowed in my house. Now I've got to a stage where there's like shit tons of chocolate and crisps in that room behind me, and I'm not there pigging out on them, because I don't have that identity anymore as someone that loses their control over food.
I think that's important. We had the biscuit and chocolate and crisp drawer thing in our house as well,
right?
But I went the other way in terms of
you always ate them.
I always ate them because that was how I like felt better.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then that's an emotional pull, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a case of, well, I know then that my usual reaction when I'm emotional is to do X, Y, and Z. But what if I was to change that? What if I was to replace that with a different behavior and challenge that identity of like, oh, every time I'm sad, I eat myself into oblivion.
Yeah.
And then it's a challenge, right? Challenge of thoughts.
Massively. So it still takes a lot of work now.
Yeah.
We're
never complete.
It's my default. It's my emotional default. Is to do that. But what I would say before was that's who I am, and that's what I've always done.
Yeah.
Now I don't say that. Now I say it's an emotional default of mine. I do that, and so I can be more in control of it.
Yes, and you're not accepting that as your fate forever.
No.
That's the thing. So this idea of like fixed versus growth mindset works quite well with restrictive versus flexible dieting, because it's that idea of like a fixed mindset would say, oh, well, this is the only way you can eat if you're eating healthily, and then anything else is off the table. And then it's the same thing here of like, you've no longer got that fixed mindset of, oh, well, whenever I'm sad, I'll eat a pack of biscuits. Now it's I know that my default reaction is to do that, but it won't always be that, and it doesn't have to be that forever. And that's that you've now opened yourself up to the idea of changing that identity piece.
Yeah. And I think we are always, we're always changing, always growing, always like there's always things we can learn about ourselves, and identity I think changes a lot as well. Like your values are the same, but identity can change.
Yeah, and I think values will change as well as you get older and learn more and to go through more experiences. But you're right in that your identity isn't fixed; it can change. And I think that's a good place, really, guys, for us to call it on the challenging thoughts piece, in knowing that it's a strategy you can use in order to challenge those thoughts you tell yourself about anything, particularly with food and fitness, because that's why you're here in this group, is getting help with that relationship with food and overcoming then sort of habits that are probably holding you back. With regards to this, I've been working on creating all of our resources inside of a membership platform, which is the same platform that holds the weight loss course for those of you that are on it. And so those of you who are on the weight loss course, part of that package is to get access to sort of resources, and the thought challenge sheet is part of those resources under the advice sheets column. So once I've got all the bugs sort of squared away on that, I will send everyone out email about the fact that they'll be added to that, getting a login and stuff, and so you'll be able to go through the thought challenge sheet. But if you want a copy, then just message me or email me, and I can get one across. Before we bounce, we did have a question on the thread before. So a question around sort of anxiety about being out of routine, unable to plan meals, eating much later at night than usual, meals being prepared by other people, so not always knowing exactly what's in them, and then struggling to fit in workouts because of a sort of a new routine and schedule. What would your advice be, Sean, to that?
Tough. Like, it is really hard when you're like, we are creatures of habit and routine, right? Like, we thrive on routine, I think, because we can control the variables. But it's hard. I think it's hard as a nutritionist, like this year, and as a coach this year, because everything is so like skew with. Do you know what I mean? Like, 2020 has just been a bitch of a year, but there's good bits and there's bad bits. Obviously, like some of the good bits are that people have they are going to see their friend, like they're seeing their friends on FaceTime more and stuff like that, and they want to be around their like other people. And if meals are prepared by somebody else, that's fine. Like, it's not going to be like a completely regular thing, right? But I think because you're anxious about little things, it just rolls into everything else. So you might just be anxious about this one meal, but it turns into like you're then anxious about all your meals, and like how many times is someone else preparing your meals and that kind of stuff. I think we're kind of in our heads a lot at the moment. I feel that way anyway, and it sounds like this person does as well. So I can't see their name on here.
Yeah, well, it was my mum who asked the question, actually.
Oh, Jenny. Okay.
In the thread before.
Yeah.
We announced this call, and I mean, I know the exact situation she's in because I'm living with her right now. So we're staying at my girlfriend's mum's house while these sort of pop-up shops are going on, because we're rotating sort of who's on the pop-up shop and then who's looking after dogs, who's working, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think, it's that idea of, as you said, Sean, just being, I think the idea of being mindful around food can cover a lot of anxiety around exactly what is in it or where it's come from. And I mean, the foods that most people create as main meals will be foods that have some kind of main base, being usually meat or fish, depending if they're vegetarian,
Yeah.
with then sides of like carbohydrate and vegetable. You are in charge of the quantity you eat. You know, so if you're in a situation where you're eating at someone else's house, you're not in control of what you get given, but you're in control of how much of that you eat.
Yeah.
And then in terms of being out of a normal routine, it can massively throw you off if you've got a fixed routine that works for you. But the worst thing you can do is then think, well, you know, fuck it, nothing's perfect, so I'm therefore just gonna completely shoot myself in the foot.
Yeah.
Your
But
best bet.
there's still variables that you can control, right? Like if
Yeah.
we're struggling to get in workouts and stuff, fine. But could you go for a walk? Like could you find, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes to go for a walk or do something different that's still giving you the chance to be active, even if it's not perfect. It's like I say, even if it's not perfect, you're still doing something. Like the worst thing you can do then is go, fuck it, I'm going to sit and watch Netflix then and eat whatever, because I can't work out. Like, that's like it's the kind of the complete opposite. I'm not saying that's what Jenny's doing, obviously, but I'm sure that temptation's there because I've had that temptation. But again, you challenge those thoughts, right? It's like, well, no. So I was going to train this day with a friend, but then he got a last minute meeting put in his diary, so we couldn't train, and I could have just gone, I can't believe I can't work out now. But I just thought, I just said, Sush, I'm going to go for a walk. Like, take 20 minutes off work, let's go for a walk. Nice brisk walk. I still got out and did something and I felt fine. It wasn't what I was planning on doing, but
didn't die.
Something. Exactly, yeah. Like my whole routine wasn't like completely screwed up because I didn't do that workout that I had planned in,
Yeah.
So I get, but that doesn't mean that you're not anxious about it. But just think of, right, so if I can't do that, what's the next best thing that I can do?
Yes, that was what I was going to say. Something's always better than nothing.
Yeah.
And if you use an implementation intention strategy, as you just said there, sure, like, okay, if I can't do this, what can I do?
Yeah.
If not this, then this.
Yeah.
You then have a bulletproof strategy for anything. Okay, if I can't do this, I'll do this instead.
Yeah.
And you can apply that to any
food
thing.
Life. Yeah, even with the food thing, it's like, okay, it's more of a control thing, I think, when you say someone else is cooking your food and it's not me. It's like, because you know exactly what you're putting into your food and how much of it you're going to have, etc. But, if you go to someone else's house and they're doing like, I don't know, say like a curry with rice or whatever it might be and like naan bread. Okay, well then you just have more of the curry. Hopefully it's got meat and veg in it. Have slightly less of the rice, slightly less of the bread. And, you're just eating a normal meal.
Yep.
You don't have to go completely crazy because someone else is cooking it.
No, exactly.
And it's also not rude to say to somebody, I'm only going to have this much.
Yeah.
And if they say, oh, but I've made all this food, I say, well, put it in some Tupperware, I'll take it home.
Yeah, I'll have it tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, we've got food in the fridge from like last few meals that we've made because we've not eaten everything.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And I think then, for you guys in the holiday season, if you are spending time at other people's houses or eating other people's food, slow your eating down. Eat until you're satisfied, not stuffed. And if people offer you food because they've made it or whatever, like extra servings or extra portions of dessert, just ask if you can take it home.
Yeah.
Have it another day. And then be okay with the fact that you can have that mindfully another day and still not ruin your progress.
Just a caveat on that as well is like today I was at a friend's and I was only meant to be there for like half an hour, but we ended up chatting for a couple of hours. And I was going to have, if I'd been tracking, so I was going to have an omelette with some bacon for breakfast. Because I was at his, he'd made like prawns and rice because he eats dinner for breakfast basically. But he had like prawns and rice and veg and stuff. And he was like, "Do you want some?" I was like, "Yeah, go on then." But if I'd have been tracking, and I'd put that omelette and bacon in my diary, I'd have probably said no to that. Because
Yeah.
Like, no, because I've put this in my diary now, so I'm going to have this.
Yes. You've pre-planned what you've had, and then you get anxious that you're not having that pre-planning.
Yeah, but it was
that can be an issue.
It was prawns, rice, mushrooms, sweet corn, and a couple of other veg, and we just had a small plate. It was like rather than a dinner plate, it was a small plate because that's what he gave me, and it's fine. I didn't die.
Didn't die.
I mean, hopefully I don't get food poisoning now, but someone else's food. but no, prawns. I just I'm not having that omelette and bacon now. That's fine. So I think if we can find a way to be a little bit more relaxed about that and less anxious, and just knowing that just because it's not what you prepared doesn't mean it's good, it's bad food.
Yeah. Challenge those thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay, why is this making me anxious? What am I really worrying about? What's the worst that could happen? And what's actually likely to happen? Write down the worst thing that can happen. And then be like, right, well, actually, what is going to happen? Probably not that.
Yeah.
Probably be all right. Probably still have enough protein and stuff in the day, enough vegetables.
Yeah.
And there's, as you said, always options for exercise as well. So cool. Well, thank you all. For those of you that watch live, I hope that you've enjoyed it. For those of you that are watching back, if you do want to pop a comment in, then Sean and I will get notified, and we'll get back to you when we can. Next week we're going to be going back to Wednesday at 12 from sort of this on out. So do mark your calendars for that time to be able to join us live just for a quick half an hour. And if you can't, obviously the calls are there to watch back, and you can find all the other calls under the tag live calls. And there's some really great topics and stuff that we've covered in the past. So definitely worth watching. I haven't decided what next week's content will be about just yet. I mean, next Wednesday will be the week before Christmas, isn't it? So maybe we'll do more about Christmas. Who knows? But for now, take care, everyone, and we'll see you again very soon.
Bye, guys.